Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mission to Inspire. It's your host again, Shola, and she's joined today by my special guest. His name is John Brink. Hi, John. How are you?
Hey, Shala, I'm doing well. How are you? How are things in the UK?
Good. And how are things where you are?
Well, I'm in Canada, in the province of British Columbia, about 800 kilometers
Mhm.
north of Vancouver, in the
Right.
center of British Columbia, an amazing province. It's a beautiful day, mid 20s, and sunny, blue skies, and I just love it. It's a beautiful place, lots of nature all around us, 50 miles around us, probably 100 lakes. It's nature at its best.
Right. I love that quick introduction of where you are and you and the weather. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I love it.
Well, you're still going to have to do another introduction because we would like to know you better than we already
Okay.
do. So, can you tell us a little bit more about you?
Okay, so that's great. So I was born in Holland, Sheila, in 1940,
Right.
and at the beginning of the Second World War.
Mhm.
So quite a story about that I still remember from the time that I was 3.5 years old. We were liberated by the Canadian Army on April the 12th, 1945. I was then about 4.5, 5 years old. It made such an impression on me that I knew from that point forward that I would go to the land of my heroes,
Yeah.
Canada.
Mm.
And so and I always knew that right from the time I was 5. And then I finally left Holland for Canada when I was 23, and I had another dream was to build a lumber mill.
Wow.
And and then academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7
Mhm.
three times. And and then they said, "What are we going to do with this guy? Maybe send him to." My parents were beautiful people, but
Mhm.
some people said to them, "Send him to the mentally challenged school." Fortunately, they didn't do that,
Okay.
and so they said we should teach him a trade where he can use his hand.
Mhm.
And my dad was in the lumber business, so they said, "Well, how about?" And my grandfather was a master carpenter, so how about a furniture maker? That's maybe a good trade. So they sent me at
Right.
13 to a furniture factory, and then at nights I would go to the college, and I became a furniture maker.
Right.
I
So,
loved it. I loved it, and the but it was a little bit hard on me because my friends that all went on to college and university kind of looked down on. They can be hard on each other, right? So I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then it was kind of looked down on.
oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Well, so your early life, from what you've just said, was marked by incredible hardship, maybe. So how did those experiences, how did that actually shape you and your determination to succeed? Because obviously you succeeded.
I did, so the war years were had an impact on the rest of my life. I still remember from the time I was 3.5, 4 years old,
Yeah.
hundreds of bombers in the air of the Allied forces
Mhm.
bombing
Yeah.
and the war factories. And my mom and dad were married when they were 30 in 1938, and they were in love and building a life. And at fairly quickly, two kids, one daughter, one son. I came later, and so life was beautiful. And then all of a sudden, the
Yeah.
war started,
Mhm.
and everything changed. And life would be never the same again for them. And so my dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940. The last they heard from him was
Yeah.
in Rotterdam when it was bombed, and
Wow.
thousands of people died. So for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he died or if he lived. And so my mom, then with three kids, had to survive the war years all on her own.
Mhm.
And so when all the bombers came overhead, I was born in northeastern Holland.
Yeah.
We would go outside in the evenings, not to watch the planes, but it felt safer outside than inside. And in
Right.
the distance, we could see the cities burning. And if you
Mhm.
visualize northern Holland next to Germany, 10 minutes from the border, in the
Wow.
distance, we could see Bremen, Hamburg,
Mhm.
and Wilhelmshaven, and all those places that
Wow.
were being bombed, and the sky was red. And
Wow.
so I remember that part, and I remember the hunger winter of 1944-45,
Mhm.
when the Germans had cut off all the food supply to Holland and northern Holland as well. And so we had nothing to eat. And it was also the coldest winter on record. So I still remember the feeling of hunger. Even now, 80 years later, I still feel that feeling of hunger.
Still feel the
And I
feeling.
still feel the cold
Oh my
and
God.
the anxiety. And every morning, the kids, my brother, my sister, myself, we would go with gunny sacks in the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, because the Germans wouldn't shoot us, and we just come back the following day. But
Wow.
so all of that. So I was left with PTSD, saw
Mhm.
Fatima when we were liberated, and the inner child. And I got counseling for the inner child well into my 50th year,
Right.
and, and very emotional.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That must have been difficult for you, especially when you grew up and you found yourself in that situation.
Yeah, the failing school was difficult. I felt somewhat of a failure. And obviously, a lot of people said, it's too dumb, this, and that, should go to a mentally disturbed school and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I knew that I was just as smart as the other ones. And I
Right.
became a person in my own world.
Mhm.
And I knew I was going to go to Canada. And
Right.
then when I was 17, I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force and for 2 years, and then started booking in the forest industry in Holland, and was already quite successful actually, even with although Holland is very much probably like the UK, is that at some point you're going to get married, or you apply for a job or a career, or you want
Yeah.
to build a business. You go to the bank and they say, okay, good plan, blah, blah, blah. Where are your diplomas? Well, I had no diplomas, other than 3 times grade seven, right? So and so I kind of want to start over again and show to me that
Mm.
I could do it. And so, and obviously going to Canada was the right thing. And then lumber, I liked always lumber, and building my own lumber mill became the dream. And so, but I wanted to start with nothing. I couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. I knew in British Columbia is where all the trees are. So I flew into Montreal with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes,
Mhm.
and then went across Canada. It's a long way, 4 days, 5 nights to Vancouver, because that's where the trees are in British Columbia. Went to the immigration office. And fortunately, there was a German fellow. I could speak some German.
Mhm.
And so told him what I wanted to do. And he said, go to Prince George. That's a boom town. That's where they're building all the lumber mills and blah, blah, blah. So I went on the bus, July 1965. I was
Mhm.
23 years old, and 12 hours on the bus to Prince George. And when I came off the bus in Prince George
Yeah.
with my suitcase, couldn't
Mhm.
speak language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. With my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I
Mhm.
counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47.
That was what I was about to ask you. That actually you moved to Canada with $25 47 pence. I was about to ask you about the challenges that you encounter, and there you are already telling us the challenges.
Yes, but I did have attitude. No matter how bad things are, I know tomorrow is going to be better. And
Yeah.
being like that. Passion, whatever I like to do, I give it 150%. And
Right.
then at work ethic, I
Hmm.
work harder than anybody. I
Wow.
still now at nearly 84, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late and I always make my bed. And so that's what I do. And so, but it didn't take very long. I was only here for less than a year. I could barely speak the language. I was superintendent already of one of the largest lumber mills. In
Hmm.
the year and a half, I already part owner of a lumber mill. But and people said to me, "Oh my God, you're so successful," and I didn't feel that way at all. I didn't, you
You
know.
did.
So and
Wow.
it took me 32 years of being here in Canada already and already being quite successful as other people perceived it. I didn't feel that way. But I walked into a bookstore.
Hmm.
Can you 32 years after I came in 1997, January 1997, and I picked up a book, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction. I don't know why I picked it up. I looked at the book written by Dr. Halliwell, and the book was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me."
And that's what you've been through without you even knowing at the time.
Yeah. So, and the more I find, first I wrote in the book,
Hmm.
Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell in 1980, in 1993, he wrote it. I bought it January 1997. I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. Now I know who I am. And finally, and so the more, and then I want to Google and finding out ADHD. I never even heard of it. I found about, and the more I found out about it, the more I started to learn that it's quite common, and they thought at the time that maybe 8% of the population have ADHD, and the more I learned about it, the more I said, no, it's much higher than that, because I found out more and more people that had it, and so then I felt I had to write a book about it, and I did. ADHD Unlocked, very successful, and so I started to speak about it more. I interacted about it more with young people and anybody else, and with my book, obviously. And then I learned that, in my opinion, it's a superpower, and that's how I see it. But it took me 5 years from when I bought the book to realizing it was me before I even went to my doc that was a personal friend, delivered our two daughters, and when I was already 62 years old, walked into his office and he said, "Hey John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And we looked at it together, and yes, I do. And
Oh
so
my
the, the more I, and then the other part that you may find interesting, Shola,
yes.
is that the book was written by Dr. Halliwell, who wrote 18 books, five on distraction, has his doctorate. He is also dyslexic, and so am I. And he is probably one of the most notorious experts on ADHD related issues. And
Right.
so I'm also a podcaster. I podcast on the Brink,
Hmm.
and my podcast number that I did about less than a year ago is
Yeah.
podcast number 203, that is with Dr. Halliwell. And and so and we had this discussion between us
Mhm.
about, I by then believe that ADHD occurs much more than I initially thought. And I suggested to the doc, who is an expert, not me,
Mhm.
that it is probably at least 20%. He said, "No, John, more than 25%.
Oh,
Interesting. I agree with him. And then the other part that I learned is that and I've been very, very involved in business, politics, and all the things around it, boards and all. I've been very, very active. I
mhm.
found that among successful entrepreneurs, and the operative is successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that likely, in my opinion, 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75% or more. And I agree with him.
Mm.
So, so that can, and though since that time I was 62, I started becoming even more successful. My companies became bigger. I
Yeah.
became an in-demand keynote speaker. I'm an author. I'm working on my sixth book, fifth and sixth book,
Mhm.
and obviously I'm very active on podcasting and all of that kind of stuff. So
Well,
that kind of shows who I am.
who you are. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Oh my God. What a significant and interesting journey. But looking at it, a lot of founders, a lot of innovators, a lot of the big names that we hear in the industries actually have either HD and a lot of them had either learning difficulty or ADHD. So it's not something that a lot of people are not aware of. But for you to have discovered when you did, and you still did great in your business, oh my goodness, that is significant. Thank you so much for sharing. I can see that you've been very open about living with ADHD anyway, and how this had shaped your approach to business and life. So, what advice would you have for others facing similar challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So for me, it was one of those factors that changed my life.
Mm,
But then realizing that at 62, I was determined by diagnosed to have ADHD. Since the time I was 13, virtually 50 years, I was wondering who I was and always kind of feeling deep inside I had failed, although I didn't think that myself,
mhm,
but proving to myself that I was just as good, not better than. And then when I did find out about ADHD, it became an obligation for me to speak about it because I do wherever I can by sharing my story is that a couple of things that do not for 1 minute believe that it is a disorder, although it says that ADHD, it isn't. It can, in fact, I believe that close to 30% in my mind of the
mhm,
population have ADHD in some form or fashion. ADHD seldom comes alone. It comes usually with something else, OCD, dyslexia, and a number of other things in combination. But
mhm,
it can be, and it is, and it was, and it will be for a lot of people that recognize it. It gives you abilities that others do not have. And I believe a couple of things for me, although I was not successful in the learning model that usually is taught around the world. In mine, it was uniquely different that unfortunately we did not address at the time. Hopefully, we will in the future. I'm very good at numbers. I'm a very good writer, always was, and I have an amazing memory. And obviously I'm very successful on podcasting. I'm very successful on as an author at a late stage. And in fact, a book that just came out here just today and
mhm.
will become very successful around the world. I'll show it to you.
Okay.
Is
Living young.
Living Young, Dying Old. It just came out, and that's a picture of me actually, and
Wow.
at 80, nearly 84, and I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, and and training for the Arnolds. And so, what I'm saying is this, and what I'm sharing with others is that to your question, with
Mhm,
ADHD and parents, soon as when you discover it, and some of them will, frequency of occurrence much higher than thought to be, at least 25 to 30% likely, in my opinion. It's not a liability. Just adjust the learning to that benefit, if you wish, in my mind. And the
mhm.
sooner you recognize it, do not look at it as a liability. And then the other part is that huge things are possible, especially if the person that is blessed with ADHD, if you wish. I do a lot of presenting, and sometimes, and I do it with passion, as you already noticed, I'm sure, even at 84. Once I'm done presenting, I have people sitting in the audience say, "Damn, I wish I had it too." So
Even
so
though
that,
it's been labeled, ADHD has been labeled as an illness, but then it's a blessing in disguise for some people.
exactly. So it's not a liability, but recognizing it. And then the other part that I tell young people in particular, everybody is unique and different. You are, as an individual, there is only one of you around this whole world. You are special. And so therefore, people are too preoccupied about, oh, that's not quite right, and this is not quite right, and I should have this, that, and it's no, you're special. Focus on the things that you can do. Everything is possible.
Everything is possible. Thank you so much for sharing and coming on our show today. Before you go, one more last question. With your extensive experience and success, what drove you to start your own podcast? Because I know that's something that you did, and you just mentioned it anyway.
Yeah, so I love podcasting. I absolutely love it. It's still on its infancy, and I'm podcasted as well. On the Brink is my podcast. I think we are approaching 300 podcasts, I think, where I'm the host. I'm also the guest on probably at least another 100, 150 podcasts. I love it. It's the future of communications, because as you and me are sitting here interacting from the UK and Central British Columbia, we already know that tens of thousands of people will be watching us and
Yes.
listening
Yes.
to us. And that's the beauty of podcasting.
Yes, it
And
is.
that's why I believe in it. That's why I love it. And that's why I'm so active in it.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. Any last minute inspirational advice for our viewers out there?
Attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows is success.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your books, how can we purchase them if we want to?
John A. Brink, BRINK.com.
Right. And your other businesses, how can we access them?
Pardon me?
I said your other businesses, how can we access them? Have you got a website?
It's all on johnabrink.com. It tells the whole story about me and what I do, and all the podcasts and all the businesses that I have and that I'm involved in. I'm a busy person, and a lot of people say to me in closing, they say to me, "How do you do all that stuff?" And for 84 years old, how do you do it all? I say ADHD. That's why.
You look very fit for your age. That's the thing.
Perfect. I like it. You do too.
Thank you.
I looked at your picture. And I hope you don't mind me saying that, but you're very pretty.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyway, so that's it on today's mission to inspire with John Brink. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Shola. Take care.
Bye, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe and keep watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe if you haven't done so. Like, follow, comment. Until next time. Goodbye.